Jack and Violet had been married for several years. They were lucky to have a strong relationship, rarely arguing, and always being considerate of each other. Both had stable jobs and lived in a cozy rented apartment. For the past week, Violet had been excited. Soon, they would celebrate a special anniversary, the day their relationship began. They often talked about celebrating not just their wedding day, but other meaningful dates too. About a month ago, they decided that on this special day, Jack would pick her up from work and they would go to a restaurant together. On Wednesday morning, Violet woke up in high spirits. She was looking forward to escaping the daily routine and enjoying a romantic evening with her husband. Jack had left for work before her, so they hadn't had much time to talk, but that was okay. The evening was just around the corner. As the workday neared its end, Violet felt even more excited. Would Jack remember to bring flowers like he did on their first date? Which restaurant had he chosen? She finished her tasks, said goodbye to her colleagues, and stepped outside, expecting to see her husband waiting for her. But he wasn't there. She looked around, hoping to spot him, but there was no sign of him, with or without a bouquet. Something felt wrong. She pulled out her phone and called him. No answer. She tried again. Still nothing. On the third try, he finally picked up. "Violet, I'm at David's birthday party," he said loudly, struggling to be heard over the background music. "He decided to celebrate this year and just called me today. I'll be home late. Don't wait up for me. Go to bed." Violet was too upset to reply. She simply hung up. He forgot. He completely forgot about their special day, even after they had planned it for so long. As she stared blankly at her phone, the sky suddenly darkened, and rain poured down as if on cue. She quickly ran under the building's canopy, joining a few coworkers who were also seeking shelter. She glared at the heavy clouds, which showed no sign of clearing. Frustrated and heartbroken, she called a taxi. Her sadness quickly turned into anger. 10 minutes later, the car arrived, and Violet, shivering from the cold, hurried inside. Violet settled into the seat as the driver cheerfully greeted her without turning around. Something about his voice felt familiar. During the ride, he made a few casual comments, and she couldn't shake the feeling that they had met before. Curious, she checked the trip details on her phone and looked up the driver's name. Her eyes widened. It was her old classmate, Matthew. He had left school in the 9th grade. "Matthew, I didn't recognize you at first," Violet exclaimed happily. The driver turned around, just as surprised. They hadn't seen each other in years. Slowly, they started catching up, their conversation flowing naturally. The evening traffic worked in their favor, giving them extra time to talk. Thrilled by the unexpected reunion, Matthew invited Violet to a nearby cafe. Without hesitation, she agreed. After all, she needed to unwind, and no one was waiting for her at home anyway. She returned home after midnight, but Jack was still absent. As she lay in bed, she reflected on the evening. Back in school, Matthew had been the heartthrob of their class, someone she had admired from a distance but never dared to approach. Yet now, they had sat across from each other, comfortably chatting over tea like old friends. A few hours later, Jack stumbled into the room, reeking of alcohol. He failed to quietly open the door and muttered something about intimacy. Disgusted, Violet pushed him away and sent him to sleep on the sofa. She felt deeply hurt. Over the next week, her meetings with Matthew continued. He started calling her, inviting her for short walks after work. It became clear that Matthew had feelings for her. A recent argument with Jack only intensified her desire to keep seeing Matthew. Gradually, their relationship shifted from friendly to romantic. Violet began staying late at work almost every evening, claiming it was the end of the reporting period and that everyone was working overtime. She always took a taxi home. Jack didn't suspect anything at first, until one evening he noticed something odd. Standing by the window, he saw his wife's taxi pull up. For the second night in a row, the car had the same license plate. In a city full of taxis, how could that be a coincidence? When Violet stepped inside and started changing her shoes, Jack didn't greet her. Instead, he immediately asked, "Who's driving you home every night?" "I've seen the same taxi 2 days in a row." "Who is it, Violet? I think your memory is failing you." "You should get that checked," Violet replied coolly. The next day, determined to uncover the truth, Jack decided to arrive early at his wife's office and watch her movements. Right at 6 p.m., the time everyone usually finished work, the same car he had seen for the past few days pulled up to the building. Then there she was. Violet wasn't staying late at all, as she had claimed. Instead, she happily walked toward the car and got into the front seat. Gotcha, Jack thought, discreetly tailing them. They drove around the city for a while, and as dusk settled, the car headed toward a secluded forest park, an area deserted in the evenings, far from pedestrians and traffic to avoid being seen. Jack parked at a distance and quietly approached on foot. Hiding behind a tree near where they had stopped, he watched closely. Then it happened. Violet and the driver leaned toward each other and began kissing. Moments later, the man pushed back his seat, and Violet climbed on top of him, starting to undress. That was the breaking point. Jack bolted from his hiding spot, yanked open the front door, and dragged his shocked wife out of the car, shoving her aside. His fury turned toward her lover. Without hesitation, he landed punch after punch to the man's face. It took Violet a moment to process what was happening. When reality hit, she screamed, calling for help. But the park was empty. Her cries echoed into the stillness. After a few more brutal blows, Jack finally stopped, his chest heaving with rage. He turned to his unfaithful wife, his voice cold and unwavering. "Your things will be outside. Don't even think about coming home." Through her tears, Violet opened her mouth to speak, perhaps to plead, to explain, but she stopped herself. She knew she had crossed a line. Only now, caught red-handed, did the full weight of her actions hit her. The divorce was swift, just as promised. Her belongings awaited her at the entrance, stuffed into garbage bags. Later, Violet tried to reach out to Jack, hoping to apologize, to fix what was broken. But it was too late. That I remember her as a tiny kid. Eventually, I moved on, went to university in the big city, and honestly, forgot all about her. She came back into my life when she was nearing the end of her senior year. By then, I had my own business up and running and was well established. I wasn't married, but I had a girlfriend at the time. And then came Irene. She was much more mature than I remembered, and I was completely captivated. We started dating, and suddenly, I felt like a teenager again, rushing home every night, unable to imagine a day without her. I had already started distancing myself from my ex-girlfriend, but I knew I owed her the truth. So, I told her everything and asked her to leave without any drama. I still remember how heartbroken she was and how she warned me about Irene. Back then, I didn't take her seriously. I brushed it off, too wrapped up in my new relationship. Things moved fast. Before I knew it, I was married and deep into family life. If only I had known then how right my ex was. If only I had known how much hurt my dear wife would cause me later. But that's a story for another time. Let's take it step by step. Our relationship developed rapidly, and soon Irene became pregnant. Our wonderful son was born, and as expected, she went on maternity leave. But after 3 years, she started insisting on working at my company. By then, our child was already in kindergarten. Now, let me be clear, she was a good employee, but not an exceptional one. My team consisted of top-level marketers who could launch an advertising campaign for something as simple as candy and still attract massive customer attention. The rest of the team often had to tread carefully around her. Meanwhile, she walked around the office